Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington. We will get to the very latest fallout from the war against Iran, with Israel saying moments ago that a new wave of strikes have begun in Tehran, and the price of oil again on the rise. But we do have to begin with breaking news on two attacks here in the United States. The first at one of the largest synagogues in the country, and the other on a major college campus in Virginia. First on that synagogue attack, which took place this afternoon at Temple Israel in West Bloomfield, Michigan, about 30 miles northwest of Detroit. Authorities say the suspect drove a truck into the building before security from the synagogue engaged the driver, and that something ignited in the vehicle. They also say the suspect is now dead. This is video from shortly after the incident. You can see smoke there from a fire billowing from the building. The Oakland County Sheriff providing this update earlier today.
He breached the building, drove down the hall, and he was engaged by security.
What do we know about this fire?
Something ignited in the vehicle. That's a work in progress. We're, through an abundance of caution, clearing the vehicle for IEDs or any explosives. We've got a significant number of bomb dogs on site, bomb techs on site, and all of that's going to be done to check the boxes.
How much damage to the building from the fire?
That I can't even tell you. You couldn't even see the hall was completely clear. We had to send people in with gas masks to clear that area.
The car actually entered all the way into the building.
All the way in the building.
All the way in. Do we know how fast he was going?
It's hard to say how fast. I mean, he was traveling with purpose down the hall from my look at the video.
We will speak with a rabbi who was in the building in just a moment. The White House says President Trump has been briefed on the situation, and multiple law enforcement agencies across the country say they are increasing their patrols around houses of worship. And just hours before that attack unfolded in Michigan, a gunman opened fire at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. And we're just learning that the gunman in that shooting was previously convicted of providing material support to ISIS. And officials say he specifically targeted an ROTC class at the university, killing one person and injuring two others. That gunman is also dead. NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter joins me, along with NBC News Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. And Jim Kavanaugh, retired ATF special agent in charge and now an NBC News law enforcement analyst, also with us. Thanks to all of you for starting us off on all of the breaking news. Tom, let me start with you. What is the very latest that we know about the synagogue attack at this point?
Right. So we'll start with the synagogue attack there, Kristen. It is our understanding now that there'll be a press conference at 6 p.m. Eastern time tonight. The FBI has put out the notice about that press conference, saying that they'll be joined by local officials. I think that's our clearest indication yet that they are leaning almost to the point of falling down on the fact that this is going to be a potential federal terrorism investigation. We do know that once the FBI would take that over, that would lean towards that. It could also be some sort of a hate crime investigation. Just given the fact that this happened at the temple. But we did hear at the last press conference from local officials, they were kind of cluing us into this possibility because they said they had picked up some initial information in the course of their investigation that led them to believe that this could be a federal case. Now, as far as what exactly happened, you heard it from officials there. You're looking at the smoke on the left side of your screen coming out of that entrance. That's where it's believed this truck went through. And then you see heavy smoke billowing out of the middle of the building. Apparently, after the car stops, there's some sort of fire that erupts. So they're looking to see whether there was an incendiary device or fireworks. Probably not a bomb, just given the nature of the damage and some of the other clues that we're looking at. But the bomb squad is there. They would look into something like that. And it was really, and they talked about the incredible acts of the security guards there at this Temple Israel, where there's obviously, you can see it clearly, a school there as well, firing upon this individual and stopping them. So that's the latest on what we know out of West Bloomfield, Michigan. But I think the fact that the FBI has announced the press conference is certainly an indication that this has the potential to be a federal case.
Absolutely, Tom. And just to be very clear, we don't know the motive yet, correct? Investigators are still looking into that?
That's right. We don't know the specific motive, and so that is something that they're looking into, at least as far as the synagogue incident.
Okay, and tell us about the very latest of the shooting in Virginia.
Sure, Kristen. Well, just as we were coming on the air, the FBI Director Kash Patel announcing that the shooting at Old Dominion earlier today will be investigated initially as an act of terrorism. This follows what NBC News first reported that an individual identified as Mohammed Baylor Jallo, born in 1989 of Sterling, Virginia, is the person that authorities believe is responsible for today's shooting. That's according to two senior law enforcement officials. They say that he was the same person, as public records clearly show, was convicted of a material support for ISIS case back in 2016. He was a former member of the Army National Guard. And that was to provide material support to that terrorism organization. He allegedly attempted to help procure weapons intended to be used in what he anticipated was going to be an attack in the U.S. in the name of ISIS. Apparently, he was sentenced to prison for 11 years and was released from BOP custody in 2024. Right now, his specific motive isn't known. Obviously, they believe that it's potentially here an act of terrorism. And it's our understanding that he specifically targeted an ROTC class, and that's where he walked into and started firing, killing one person in that class, injuring two others. The FBI director is saying it was an act of bravery by those that were in the class to stop him. It's our understanding that's how the suspect, Jared, was killed, that apparently it was other ROTC members or members of that class that overcame him, Jallo, who was killed in that incident. So it is possible. We're still waiting to get some more information. But it's possible we might have two serious incidents here in this country being investigated as acts of terrorism today.
Just extraordinary. All right, Tom Winter, thank you so much for starting us off with all of your latest reporting on those investigations. Let me turn to Kelly O'Donnell now. Kelly, this, of course, comes at a very tense moment for religious communities nationwide. What has the broader response been from law enforcement agencies all around the country?
Well, certainly with the war in Iran, there had been an alert, a sense of posture that was an elevated threat environment. Not specific threats, but many communities increased security, patrols. In the case of the West Bloomfield, Michigan temple, they had their own on-site security. Many do, especially those in communities where they feel they have the resources. That's a particularly large community, to have that level of vigilance, which is all the time, but now heightened in part because of world events. And as Tom was just outlining, if we are now able in the foreseeable future here to draw connections between the actions at Old Dominion University, the actions in West Bloomfield, Michigan, even potentially the actions in Austin, Texas, where the gunman was wearing an Iran T-shirt and opened fire outside an entertainment area. Those kinds of incidents, while we don't see any direct connection among them, are they in an environment where there is inspiration to act because of world events, as we are seeing with the U.S. engagement in Iran? The president has been asked about his concerns about this. He has acknowledged that there could be an increased risk. He's certainly been briefed on these incidents today. And so there has been an awareness of the potential for greater activity. That's different than specific and credible threats on a given location or a part of a certain community, the Jewish community as an example. But what we have seen is that over time, and really since the October 7th war involving Israel and Gaza, there was already a much greater incidence of anti-Semitism. At times, just in terms of words or vandalism, not these kind of violent acts. But that, too, has been on the upswing. So when you put all of this together, we're just in an environment where it's hard to separate what's happening on the global stage with what's happening in local communities, where people see that there is a need to be vigilant, and law enforcement responding very, very forcefully today in Michigan, with lots of different layers of local and federal enforcement to try to come in there and get answers and to prevent anything more serious from happening. The good news in West Bloomfield, Michigan, is the fact that the community itself was safe. The children attending school and the facilities there all safe. But obviously it was a violent attack using a vehicle, which is itself an incendiary device, thousands of pounds. And of course, we're looking to see what the next steps will be for national federal law enforcement about how to prepare other communities to be on alert. Kristen?
Kelly, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of parents breathing a sigh of relief after just a terrifying incident there at that synagogue. Thank you so much for that reporting. Jim, let me turn to you. Let's talk about the attack on the synagogue. What do you make of the incident? What would you be looking for if you were a part of this investigation right now? What are the key things that stand out to you?
Well, I think, first of all, looking at the scene, it may be a very simple attack. This guy may have had, a few gallons of gasoline in the front of the truck, and he planned to drive in there, jump out, spread it around, and light the place on fire. Something simple as that. He could have had Molotov cocktails or incendiary devices, as Tom and Kelly discussed, of course, and those will be looked for. But they don't have to be present. He could just be a 5 gallons of gasoline. And during the shooting, he might have been able to ignite it, or maybe even was ignited by some of the gunfire. Either way, it looks like a pretty simple attack on its face right now. Secondly, in the investigation, they're going to be looking for all the normal things: conspirators, co-conspirators. Was it inspired? Is he a lone mad dog actor, inspired by world events or ISIS or Iran, or was he directed? Was he supplied with money and marbles and chalk and explosives and guns? We don't have any indication of that, and we don't even know if he had a gun or fired a gun. So right now, it looks pretty simple, and maybe he's an inspired actor. We don't even know his motivation. We don't know if it's tied to world events or if it's something else. Maybe at the news conference, we'll be able to hear, what they think is the motivation. If it turns out to be inspired by international events, that would be the third one domestically behind Old Dominion, where we have a guy who's convicted of supporting ISIS and went to the federal penitentiary for it. So we know what he's all about. And then, as Kelly reported, the killer in Austin who was wearing a shirt with the Iranian flag. So if this turns out to be related, that's the third one we have in just weeks. So it's just the initial phase of the blowback from the war. We're in a war with a nation that has 80 million people, and many of them are supporters of the Ayatollah who we just killed and all their leaders. So they hated us before, but now they want revenge. At least a large portion of their nation does. Not all of them, but enough to have kept that dictatorship propped up since 1979. And we all know that they've been the major state sponsor of terrorism worldwide since 1979, and they've done bombings in Buenos Aires. ATF sent a big bomb team down to investigate that in the 80s, early 90s, because they blew up a Jewish Israeli center there. They tried to kill a Saudi ambassador at a restaurant in Washington, and that plot was thwarted. And they had another feeble plot where they tried to kill some of our political leaders in New York. But now it's all ramped up. This is the first picture. The second picture could be worse and more sophisticated. So we really, as a nation, have to step up our security and our awareness. A little bit of fear is okay. It helps you make judgments that this could happen. And it could happen anywhere. A beer hall in Austin, a university in Virginia, and maybe, we don't know the motive yet here, but maybe it will be part of this attack in Michigan. So at any rate, we're at war with a nation that doesn't have an army they can field against us, an Air Force they can field against us, or a Navy they can field against us. And the only thing they have is asymmetrical terror. And so we need to pay attention to that.
Well, it's a good message and a terrifying series of events, that's for sure. Jim Kavanaugh, thank you so much for your great analysis, as always. We are following this breaking news in Michigan closely, and we will speak with a rabbi who was in the building during the attack in just a moment. You don't want to miss that conversation. Coming up, the war with Iran now causing the largest oil supply disruption in history, as Iran's new supreme leader defiantly vows to keep blocking the vital Strait of Hormuz, and attacks across the region escalate. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome. Welcome back. Turning now again to that attack on the synagogue in Michigan. Joining me is Rabbi Arianna Gordon. She is the director of education at Temple Israel, and she was in the building at the time of today's attack. And we did have her hooked up, and apparently we have lost a shot, but we are going to continue to try to get her so that we can interview her about the horrific events that unfolded today. And as soon as we have our connection reestablished, we will go back to that interview. But we do want to turn now to the latest fallout from the war against Iran and the intensifying disruption to global energy markets as President Trump tries to downplay the economic impact of rising oil prices, and as Iran's new supreme leader issues what the state media is calling his first public statement since his country's senior leadership was decimated by U.S. and Israeli strikes. We should note we did not hear or see the new supreme leader himself, who was wounded during the start of the war. Rather, an anchor on state TV read his defiant statement, in which he vowed to keep blocking transit through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital artery for roughly 20% of the world's oil. It comes as Iran intensifies its strikes on oil related to targets throughout the region. This week alone, Iran has hit a fuel tank at a port in Oman, 2 fuel tankers off the coast of Iraq, and an energy refinery in Bahrain. Today, crude oil prices settled around $96 a barrel, up 42% since the start of the war. A separate benchmark for oil prices in Europe settled above $100 today for the first time since August of 2022. President Trump now arguing rising prices are not a bad thing, saying in a post on social media that when oil prices go up, quote, "we make a lot of money from domestic oil production," and going on to say that it's more important to stop Iran from having nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, there are still major questions about the U.S. Navy's ability to escort oil tankers through the strait, as the administration has promised. Here's what the Trump administration is saying about all of that today.
It'll happen relatively soon, but it can't happen now. We're simply not ready. All of our military assets right now are focused on destroying Iran's offensive capabilities and the manufacturing industry that supplies their offensive capabilities.
Do you think by the end of this month, the U.S. Navy will be escorting some of those ships through the strait?
I think that, yes, I think that is quite likely the case. But again, I mean, I'll be over at the Pentagon later today, but that is what the military is working on.
It is my belief that as soon as it is militarily possible, the U.S. Navy, perhaps with an international coalition, will be escorting vessels through.
Now, it's hard to overstate the significance of this war when it comes to the U.S. and global economy. In its monthly report, the International Energy Agency warning it's creating, quote, the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market, and adding that the current flow through the Strait of Hormuz is somewhere between a trickle and a near standstill. This video from the group Marine Traffic, which monitors the movement of vessels around the world, showing the reduced traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. We should note that some of the noise could be the result of satellite disruptions or signal jammers. All of this coming as President Trump continues to offer more mixed messaging about his strategy, claiming the U.S. has already won the war, but also that the U.S. needs to finish the job.
You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over. But we won. But I'm pleased to report that earlier today, the International Energy Agency agreed to coordinate the release of a record 400 million barrels of oil from various national petroleum reserves around the world, which will substantially reduce the oil prices as we end this threat to America and this threat to the world. We don't want to leave early, do we, huh? We got to finish the job, right?
Joining me now is NBC News Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel, NBC News Senior Business Correspondent Christine Romans, NBC News White House Correspondent Monica Alba, and NBC News International Correspondent Raf Sanchez, who is in Beirut. Thank you all for being here. Richard, let me start with you. So we got this extraordinary audio of the anchor with the state media reading what was purportedly a statement by the new supreme leader. But Richard, you can't see the supreme leader. We didn't hear his voice. What are the key takeaways and how are people in the region responding?
So, first of all, Iranian state media broadcast this message, this statement from the supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, his first statement since he was appointed as supreme leader, replacing his father, the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And as you say, he was not on camera. There was no picture of him. There was no audio of his voice. And that only is fueling speculation here and around the world that he may have been injured in the same attack that killed his father, that he may have been seriously injured. We're hearing many different reports, none of them confirmed about the severity of his injuries, from an amputated leg to that he might be in a coma. But the fact that he didn't appear on camera, couldn't be heard on camera, is only fueling those rumors that are circulating like wildfire around this region. But the message that he conveyed is one that has been reinforced by other members of the Iranian military, the Revolutionary Guard, particularly about the Strait of Hormuz. So whether this message came directly from him, whether he is incapacitated, we don't know. But the message was clear, and the message was that this tanker war that Iran is engaged in right now will continue.
Well, and Richard, we're seeing those images of massive tanker fires in the Strait and all across the region, quite frankly. The new supreme leader has said the Strait should remain closed and is vowing to continue attacks. What is the state of play right now, Richard?
Well, it's not just Iran anymore. Iran's ability to fire missiles, as CENTCOM reports every day, is greatly diminished. And its ability to launch drone attacks against the Gulf, it is still doing it, but not at the same level that it did in the first few days of the war. But I am right now in the northern Israeli city of Haifa, and Hezbollah, which is a militia based in Lebanon, backed by Iran, a supporter of Iran, has now joined in this war in a full way. And you can talk to Raf Sanchez about the impact that is having on Beirut. But it is now, for Israel, a two-front war, one against Iran and the other up here in the north, a cross-border war into Lebanon. And Israel's defense minister made a direct threat, saying that if the Lebanese government, and the Lebanese government does not support Hezbollah, in fact, the Lebanese government has called on Hezbollah to be disarmed, but the Israeli defense minister said that if the government can't stop Hezbollah from carrying out attacks at northern Israel, then Israeli troops will take more territory inside Lebanon. There are already troops on the ground. More Israeli troops have been deployed to northern Israel for a potential deepening cross-border incursion. Israel already occupies a significant amount of land inside Lebanon and now is threatening to take even more unless the Lebanese government can stop this militia group.
Well, Richard, let me ask you about something that Britain's defense minister is saying, that Iran is likely laying mines in the Strait. What are the implications of that, if true?
It would have a huge implication because mines and sea drones are these kind of weapons that are very difficult to find. They can stay underwater or semi-submerged for a long time. They can be hit accidentally. It is not like stopping an incoming ballistic missile, which you can see, and you can see its trajectory. You can predict its launch. They can linger and serve as a very long-term problem for the Strait of Hormuz, and removing them, like removing mines from the territory, can take a very from the ground can take a very long time. So it means shipping costs go up, insurance costs go up, means that a ship could hit one accidentally. They move, obviously, with the current. They could move out of the Strait of Hormuz. It is a very dangerous development, if true, for this critical waterway and beyond.
Well, Richard Engel, thank you so much for joining us with all of those breaking developments. We really appreciate it. Please continue to stay safe. And let me go to Raf Sanchez, who you were just talking about. Richard, Raf, you just heard Richard make the point that Israel has been launching waves of attacks into Lebanon. What exactly are you seeing on the ground there?
Well, Kristen, we've been seeing and hearing those waves of attacks here in Beirut. Israel, in just the last couple of hours, has been pounding the southern suburbs of the city, an area that it considers to be a Hezbollah stronghold. But then, maybe 3 hours ago, they struck where you're seeing now in the center of your screen, the very heart of the Lebanese capital. That is in the middle of the city. It's a densely populated part of town. They say that they were targeting Hezbollah there. But there really is a feeling here in Beirut that nowhere is safe at this point. And there is intense Israeli fire going on further south near the Israeli border. And we should say Hezbollah is shooting back. There was this coordinated strike last night with Iran, Hezbollah firing some 200 rockets, 20 drones, according to the Israeli military. So it certainly does feel here in Lebanon that the situation is escalating. Kristen.
Well, let me ask you about Hezbollah, because there was a sense that Hezbollah had been significantly weakened after its latest conflict with Israel. What is the actual state of Hezbollah?
It's a really, really good question. Hezbollah, before October 7th, 2023, when the fighting started in Gaza and then spread all across the region, was really the crown jewel of the Iranian proxy groups. It was probably the best armed, non-governmental army anywhere in the world, some 150,000 missiles and rockets. But then when it came to the fighting with Israel, it underperformed relative to expectations. The Israelis really carried out a number of successful operations, including, you'll remember, that infamous pager operation where Hezbollah operatives had their pagers exploding in their hands. But the group is clearly down but not out, and they are fighting back. They are, it seems, still able to coordinate with Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. 2 Israeli soldiers have been killed in southern Lebanon so far. Those are the only Israeli military casualties of this war so far. The Iranians, as far as we know, have not inflicted any military casualties. So Hezbollah is weakened, but it is certainly able to still fight for now, at least. Kristen.
All right, Raf Sanchez reporting from Lebanon. Please be safe, Raf. We appreciate your being there for us. Let me turn to Christine Romans now. Christine, let me get your take on the latest. The International Energy Agency agreeing to release 400 million barrels of oil from reserves, of course, to help ease those prices that have continued to go up. What do you make of this? How significant is this move? Could it have an immediate impact?
Well, the announcement is just huge. 400 million barrels. We've never seen anything like that. And it's double what the same group committed to after Russia invaded Ukraine a few years ago. So it shows you just how big the problem and the concern is about global supply. It'll take time for this oil to make it to the market. Experts tell me we're talking about this is maybe, I don't know, if you're talking about 20 million barrels a day in the Strait of Hormuz that's offline. This is 400 million. The world consumes 100 million a day. That's 4 days of global supply. This huge and historic release will accommodate. So that's one reason why you're seeing oil prices continue to rise. Until the Strait, the pictures you're seeing there, until that is not a concern anymore, ships on fire, until the Strait is putting through 80 or so tankers a day, you still have these global oil supply concerns. And so that is the underlying problem here. All the other attempts to mitigate oil prices are just that, attempts around the edges to mitigate what are rising oil prices.
Well, Christine, you get to, I think, what's a really important point about how quickly will people actually feel the impact here? How quickly could U.S. gas prices actually start to drop because of these actions?
I've been on the phone for 2 or 3 days about when gas prices are going to go down, and not one single expert has said gas prices will go down. What they're telling me is moves like this will slow the advance of gas prices. One expert telling me the wholesale increase in gasoline prices hasn't all of it appeared on the retail level yet. So even if oil prices stopped rising from here, you still have a delayed reaction that has to be baked in here. And we don't see an end in sight overall here for the conflict in the region. And unstopping this chain of events is going to take time, even assuming it were to happen overnight. So what I hear from experts is this is the biggest supply disruption in history. There is nothing like it since the 1970s. They tell me we will not see gas lines and shortages in the U.S. because the U.S. is now a huge energy supplier in its own right, but you will see higher prices. That's how it'll percolate through here.
All right, Christine Romans watching all of the markets, the money, gas prices, everything for us. Thank you, Christine. Really appreciate it. Let me turn to Monica Alba over at the White House now. Monica, let me ask you, because we're learning that the president is considering waiving what's called the Jones Act. You have new reporting about this. Talk about what specifically the Jones Act is and how this would work.
So, Kristen, this is basically a century-old statute that requires that goods that are going between U.S. ports, that they be transported specifically on U.S. crewed, U.S. flagged, and U.S. built specific ships. So the thinking here is that if you waive the Jones Act, if you loosen some of those restrictions, then you can actually have foreign tankers or foreign ships to come in and help make things flow a little bit more easily to perhaps, again, deal with exactly what you were just talking to Christine about. But there are two issues here. One is that the administration says this is something that the president is still weighing. He hasn't decided whether he's definitely going to do it or how long the waiver would actually be in effect. And second is, again, what you guys were just discussing. It's unclear whether that would actually help prices go down. And we don't know how fast or how much that would help in the short term, which is where the administration knows they have a limited window to try to address some of these top concerns.
You know, Monica, it's interesting what the president has been saying about this issue. On social media, he posted, quote, "When oil prices go up, we make a lot of money." But that's not exactly what he was saying on the campaign trail, right? Talk about some of the mixed messaging that we're hearing.
Yeah, and this really does add to several examples of mixed messaging in an administration and a White House that seems to want to present this and sort of have it both ways when they're talking about this, and the awareness that prices, gas prices going up, the pain at the pump is something that is going to be a pain that is felt in the immediate. You have all of these top cabinet officials recognizing that, but the president also then trying to sort of spin why it also might be good for the United States at the same time, while the president is also saying that this is a short-term excursion, in his words, but that there's still some things left to be done militarily. So there is a lot of confusion that is coming out specifically from the president and from the Trump administration about what they are doing economically to combat and try to tame oil prices, while also trying to discuss the military objectives and what this might actually mean for when this wraps up. The president just talked about this a short time ago at an event for Women's History Month, where he is saying that things are moving along very rapidly. That is how he is trying to put this into context. But remember that initially the White House had said this would be a 4 to 6 week military conflict. The president trying to project this week it could be wrapping before that, while still trying to figure out exactly how the president is going to determine that the U.S. military objectives are done. We haven't gotten his exact assessment for how he's going to be able to determine that and declare victory potentially. Kristen.
All right, Monica Alba at the White House for us. Monica, thank you so much. Joining me now is retired Colonel Steve Warren, former Chief of Strategic Communications for the Army and now an NBC News military analyst. Colonel Warren, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's great to be here with you.
Well, it's great to have you here. I want you to pick up where Monica just left off, which is that it's not clear when exactly President Trump can extract the United States from this war. He has said he can do it at any time. What is the military reality check on that? Once you are entangled in a military engagement like this, how complicated is it to actually extract troops?
There's two components to this particular military entanglement that we're in. Component one is the accomplishment of all of the military objectives that the president, the secretary, the chairman have laid out. And we're familiar with those: destroy the missiles, destroy the Navy, take care of the nuclear weapons, etc. So we're familiar with those. When those missions are accomplished, we'll know it. We can measure those things. And then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs can go and tell his boss, hey, Mr. President, we've accomplished your missions. What do you want to do now? The second component of that is the tough one, though, because now the Iranians have said, well, we're going to keep striking the ships in the straits. And so now that's a problem. Now we have to make them stop doing that. And that's going to be trouble.
Well, and to that point, 3 more oil tankers were struck overnight in the Strait of Hormuz. Talk about the implications of that and strategically what Iran thinks it's accomplishing with those strikes?
Iran's strategy, I think, very clearly, this is a test of wills. It's how much physical punishment can the Iranians withstand versus how much economic pain can the West withstand. So it's who can hold out the longest. And right now, the Iranians are trying to squeeze the West. And this is classic asymmetric warfare. We're hitting them with bullets. They're hitting us in our pocketbook, right? That's an asymmetry, two different things. But both sides are being affected. So it remains to be seen who can last the longest. I don't predict we'll be able to wipe out the Iranian drones. There's too many of them. It's like, if people may remember back during the Iraq wars, the biggest threat was these IEDs.
Yes.
It's kind of the same thing. Small, cheap, effective, and terrorizing.
Well, Britain's defense minister is saying he believes that Iran has started placing mines in the strait, and demining apparently very difficult. Talk a little bit about that and why it's so complicated.
Mines are tough. Again, they're cheap. They're very difficult to see under general rules, and they terrify mariners for good reason. One single mine can sink a ship. It can sink it with one mine. They're magnetic. Some of them are anchored at various levels, so they can be a defense against submarines as well. So they're anchored at various levels. Some of them floating on the surface. They're magnetic, so they'll drift towards where a big metal ship is, and one impact, and you've got a massive fireball.
Could they actually pose a threat to the long-term goals of this conflict, this war?
Absolutely. I mean, they absolutely will. If the goals are now to, allow commerce to continue, one of the stated goals was to prevent Iran from projecting power outside of its borders. Well, the Strait are outside of Iran's borders. That's going to be a problem. And mines are so difficult to clean up. We have to use wooden ships to get them because they're magnetic. These are a real problem.
Well, Israel, let's talk about what Israel is doing, essentially expanding its attacks. You heard my colleague Raf Sanchez talking about this against Hezbollah in Lebanon. What do you make of the state of play there? And the sense that Hezbollah had been weakened, but clearly Israel thinks there are still plenty of targets.
That's right. And to be clear, Hezbollah fired at Israel first after the Ayatollah was killed. And I think the Israelis have simply had enough. This is their opportunity now. I believe they view it as their chance to go finally finish off Hezbollah, or as close as they can. But what I think people should remember, this is what is most notable to me. The Israelis have been working on Hezbollah really in earnest for the last 2 years. And Hezbollah is still shooting. And we've only been working on the Iranians now for 12, 13 days. So something to keep in mind, right? It's harder to wipe out an enemy's capability to shoot back than many people think.
All right. Colonel Steve Warren, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your perspective. We really appreciate it. And we're turning back to the breaking news next. In Michigan, a rabbi who was inside the temple during today's attack will join us next. Stay with us on Meet the Press now. Welcome back. We just heard from President Trump moments ago at the White House addressing the attack on that synagogue in Michigan, saying he has been briefed on the situation and he sends his love to the Michigan Jewish community and the people of the Detroit area. We also just got a statement from Temple Israel that, quote, everyone is safe following the attack. And joining me now is Rabbi Arianna Gordon. She is the director of education at Temple Israel, and she was in the building at the time of today's attack. Rabbi Gordon, thank you for joining us. I'm so sorry for this violence that has been brought to your community. I want to start by asking how you're doing, how your community is doing after this horrific incident.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on this afternoon. We're doing okay. I live in an incredible community, which really rose to the occasion, and we feel so loved and supported in this really horrific moment.
And of course, there is a school there. It is my understanding, and based on the statement that, of course, the synagogue released, all of the children are safe. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have incredible rock star teachers and an unbelievable security team, as well as local law enforcement. And everyone did exactly what they were supposed to do. And everyone got out safely. All of our children are with their parents now. And we are so deeply appreciative of our team for doing what they needed to do to make sure that it was the best possible outcome today.
Oh, well, thank goodness. Thank goodness for that. I do want to ask you if you can tell us about those moments that the synagogue was attacked. How did you experience it?
Yeah, so I don't really have a lot of information to share about those moments at this time. We're really debriefing and processing and learning more about what happened. It was definitely a scary afternoon, but again, really relieved in this moment that everyone is safe and unharmed.
Yeah, understood. Can you walk us through what was going through your head when you realized that the temple was being attacked?
You know, I think we all do these trainings so that we learn what we are supposed to do in these moments and then pray to God you never have to have that experience. But I'm thankful that we all were well trained, that we knew how to be in touch with our teachers. We knew how to lock down. We knew how to listen to the law enforcement that were coming into the building so that we could really follow those instructions very carefully and thoughtfully.
And of course, as we've been reporting, Temple Israel is one of the largest synagogues in the country. I know it is central to your community there. Talk a little bit about the role that your congregation plays in West Bloomfield.
Yeah, we are the biggest congregation in the Metro Detroit area, and we certainly are leaders in all that we do in this community, and it's a very important part of the Jewish community in Detroit. We are often hosts for events, we run schools, we run programs, we obviously run services on a regular basis. So we have been hearing from all of those around us really throughout the country all day long, wishing us well and thinking about us and sending their prayers towards our community today.
And I think echoing how everyone right now is feeling, sending all of our thoughts to you all as you go through this. Let me just ask you finally, Rabbi, we know that there have been stepped up security at religious institutions all across the country. I know that investigators don't know what the exact motive was yet, but what is your message to other communities who are seeing this, learning about the horror that happened today and who might feel afraid?
I mean, I think that fear is very valid. We had an incredible security team. I think doing the training, learning what you're supposed to do so that in that moment you can react as we have been told is incredibly important. And we're very appreciative of all of that.
Absolutely. All right, Rabbi Gordon, thank you so much for your time. Please continue to stay safe. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, and still to come, President Trump seemingly dismissing Americans' pain at the pump and what that could mean for the midterms. We'll get the panel's take next. You're watching Meet the Press Now.
Oil prices are already coming back down, and it's going to come down, but we're not leaving until that job is finished, and it's going to be very fast. It's going to be very fast, but we're not going to count on having competent presidents.
Welcome back. That was President Trump in Kentucky yesterday, seeking to assure his supporters that rising oil and gas prices due to the Iran war will not be sticking around, even as crude oil prices are up more than 40% since the start of the war, and Americans are seeing an over 20% increase in the average cost of a gallon of gas. On social media today, the president suggesting that stopping Iran was more important than oil prices and that, quote, when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money. Joining me now to weigh in on all of this, our panel, Mariana Sotomayor, congressional reporter for The Washington Post, John McCarthy, former senior advisor for political engagement to President Obama, and T.W. Arihi, Republican strategist and former national press secretary for the NRSC. Thanks to all of you for being here today. Mariana, let me start with you and the president's message around these rising gas prices. We know that administration officials are privately expressing concern and an urgency to bring these prices down. But here you have the president on social media saying, and I'll just remind everyone, quote, when oil prices go up, we make a lot of money. What do you make of the mixed messaging?
Yeah, it's really not great when you talk to Republicans on Capitol Hill because they would love the president to stay on message on affordability. And he's, of course, talking about a number of different things. This is just the latest wrinkle, I think, on that front. And to your point, what you're hearing privately from the White House is also what I'm hearing privately from congressional Republicans, especially as they're eyeing the midterms. They do not want this to last for a long time. They are repeating the president's point. They're saying, I really believe, and I hope that he is right, that this is not going to be a long conflict, because the longer that this goes, I mean, the way that they are watching the midterm election is if things do not improve by June, both the economy and if we are still entangled in Iran and potentially have boots on the ground, I mean, there are a number of House Republicans at the retreat in Trump's hotel in Doral saying that is going to be a legitimate problem. Even the majority whip, Tom Emmer, described it as fun, but privately, Republicans are describing it as a completely different way. It's going to be a problem.
Well, TW, weigh in on that timeline. Does that sound about right to you? Because I have Republicans saying to me, look, Republicans will probably be unified around the president for about 7 weeks. They're going to give him to work through this. And if we don't start to see oil prices come down, that's when the real jitters are going to step in. And by the way, boots on the ground would be a whole different level.
Boots on the ground changes the dynamics totally. I would probably give it a little later than June. I'd say probably more late July, early August timeframe. But look, I don't think the president entered into this action ever thinking oil prices were going to stay low.
Right.
This was always going to be a consequence, an unintended consequence of this action. But the good news on that front is we've destroyed Iran's complete navy. We are going after now smaller vessels every single day that can lay mines or get into other shenanigans in the Strait of Hormuz. They have no ability to defend their airspace. These are really good things. And by the way, we've now heard, and you repeated this last hour, talk from Scott Bessent, Chris Wright, talking about escorts through the Strait for these vessels. And that's great. And in addition, there's going to be international cooperation on that. European nations have signals that they will help in that regard. So I am confident that A, this will be a shorter affair, and B, we can get the Strait of Hormuz secure and get things flowing in good order.
John, what about that argument that Republicans are making, will undoubtedly make on the campaign trail, that Iran has been a problem for decades and that President Trump's dealing with and trying to get rid of this, what has been a global threat?
I think it's a complex argument to make at a time when most people are still struggling with costs. I mean, Donald Trump ran as an America First candidate. He talked about how he was going to tackle affordability. He talked about how he wasn't going to start any forever wars. And it seems like we've kind of put all of that to the wayside by now, all while Americans are still finding, housing costs too high, the price of gasoline going up. If Donald Trump wants to sit and say that prices are going to go up and that's his midterm message, we will take it. I mean, as Democrats. But I think that, voters are not going to reward this. And foreign policy tends to be a place where presidents can often act in kind of an unchecked way and come across as commanding. But this is not appearing to be one of those. I mean, every poll that we have seen about this conflict so far would suggest that Americans are not for it. So I don't think the president is coming across as commanding. I think it's coming across as if there's not really a plan.
TW.
Yeah, I would push back a little bit on that. The Washington Post had a great piece today talking about the polling surrounding this issue. And you see the worst numbers for President Trump when Trump is in the question. We all know in polling, it is how you phrase the question. So do you support President Trump's actions in Iran? The negatives are way up. If you say, do you support the U.S. military strikes in Iran? It is completely split. About 42% support, 40% oppose, and unsure takes the rest. So I think people are still making up their mind. Donald Trump has shown already that he is a decisive leader in Venezuela, in the first term when he dealt with ISIS in swift fashion, and now Iran. And by the way, this is going to solve a lot of problems down the road when China is trying to make a move and Russia were taking their allies off the board.
And of course, President Trump traveling to China in the coming weeks. This will be the backdrop to that trip. Mariana, let me ask you, because Senate Republicans are trying to put the focus back on affordability, passing today an affordable housing bill. There's reporting that apparently President Trump said to Speaker Johnson he's very focused on the SAVE Act, which is a voting act. Quote, no one gives a bleep about housing. Now, the White House is pushing back and saying, no, he didn't say that. But what's the reaction been, broadly speaking, to how the president is dealing with this legislation?
Yeah, you can see that Congress wants to focus on something because they are eyeing the midterms. They want to keep their majorities. And the president's pushing something else. I mean, you mentioned the SAVE Act. the House already passed 2 different voting bills. And now Trump is saying, forget those, let's do a completely new one. And whether you're talking to someone in the Freedom Caucus or the most moderate Republican, they're saying that's not going to pass. We just don't have enough time. We should be focusing on housing and other bipartisan measures like permitting reform. Remember when that was a thing that both parties wanted to get done? I don't think that the House is going to pick up that housing bill, in large part because that was the message received by the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, TW, do you think that the president should be so focused on the SAVE Act, including the fact that he's now added these amendments, in his words, no men and women's sports and other cultural measures that he's put into this voting bill?
Yeah, look, the SAVE Act is important because it is one of those 80-20 issues. If Gallup had a poll just in October saying that 83% of Americans actually supported showing proof of citizenship to register to vote. The overwhelming majority of Americans support voter ID at the ballot box. These are things that should be easy to accomplish. And I think he sees it 80-20 issue. He's like, let's talk about it more. But to everything you've just said, affordability is still number one. And I think we should be able to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah, Republicans want him to lean into that. There's no doubt about that. John, I have to ask you about one of the big headlines on the Democratic side today. Congressman Jim Clyburn announcing he's running for re-election at age 85. Here's a little bit of what he had to say. Take a look.
I know that in a few months I'm going to celebrate the 47th anniversary of my 39th birthday. Adds up to 86 years. But if I were not up to it, I would not do it.
What's the reaction inside the Democratic Party, which is right now having a big debate over whether it is time for generational change?
Yeah, and I mean, you're seeing that in primaries all across the country. You're seeing it inside the party apparatus.
Maine.
I will say in the Democratic Party, diversity is our strength. And I've never liked the litmus test that if you're at a certain age or under a certain age, you are or are not qualified. Put it to the voters. I will say Jim Clyburn has kind of a celebrated status inside of our party. And if you've ever spent any time with him recently, he's still just such a wise and great voice inside of the Democratic caucus. I think we're enhanced by having him.
TW, was there any reaction so far in your Republican circles to this announcement?
No, not a whole lot. Look, I worked in South Carolina. I know South Carolina politics very well. He is a greatly respected man, even among the Republicans of South Carolina. He gets a lot of respect from that. And I think with so many departures, like Steny Hoyer, Pelosi, et cetera, I think he's looking at November and saying, we might take over the House. It might be our first African-American Speaker of the House, and I want to help guide him through it. And I think that's part of this whole calculation that he's going through. I think he has energy. I think he's smart. I think he's wise, and whoever is the next speaker could lean on him.
Mariana, what's your take and what was the reaction on Capitol Hill? Because all signs, a lot of signs were pointed to him deciding not to run. So this is a little bit of a surprise, which we don't typically get.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously Pelosi and Hoyer stepped back from leadership several years ago, and he was the only one who decided to stay. He was assistant leader for several years until 2023. So he's a little different than the pack of two there. But something that's top of mind for Democrats is the Supreme Court is obviously going to be debating the Voting Rights Act. So if that is struck down, South Carolina can possibly gerrymander, and he is truly the only Democrat. Even if that district becomes much more Republican, Democrats think that just because of his name recognition, he could still win. So there might be some political strategy behind this.
All right. Well, we will track his race closely, guys. Great conversation. Thank you so much, Mariana, John, and TW. We really appreciate it. We are back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. There's more ahead on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.